Hey everyone, welcome to Hard Lens Media. It's Friday, the weekend is here among us. I'm joined here today with Paul DuPont, Daniel Lupker, and Paul, you're manning the board right there.
I've got buttons to change things.
So many buttons, and you want to know why we have it? It's because of you guys, our viewers and subscribers. We're still getting out some of the kinks in our studio, but I am proud to say that this is a fully functioning operational battle station. I mean, oops.
Yeah, we got a few more things to
Yeah.
do. We're right now on track to finish everything by Saturday. So, yeah, on Monday you'll see the fully completed set, and that's going to be a whole lot of fun.
Yeah, and it's also, again, this is like how our show is going to be run now, Monday through Friday, 6 p.m. Central Standard Time, so you guys know when we're on. Now, occasionally we will do some individual videos that we will upload, and I know that YouTube's acting weird, so it doesn't really notify you when we upload our content. Some of you are aware, some of you are not. It's something that's out of our control, so double check and triple check that you're subscribed. But the good news is Monday through Friday, 6 p.m. Central Standard Time is when we go live, so you know when we actually have our show, and you guys are helping this channel up, so please make sure you're subscribed, hit that ring bell notification, like, comment, share our content, and support us on Patreon if you support independent media, because we're building something here, and it's because of you guys, our supporters, and I'm just incredibly humbled by it.
Yeah,
It's awesome.
Yeah.
We got a studio, and
we're not shoulder to shoulder anymore.
our subscribers are helping us
Yeah,
expand.
yeah.
To larger
You
desks.
know, we're able to do this. we're able to do this and also not be so tight. We got air conditioning. Thank you, guys.
They're lights.
Yeah, we got lights. We got camera. You know, it's great.
Whenever we do an upgrade, we want every part of this to be an upgrade. And
Yeah.
so we have better lighting, we have better space, better sound, better backgrounds, better tables, like Paul said,
Yeah.
better sound systems. We want to show you guys that everything that we do everything you guys do for us is very meaningful. And we actually have a video that I'm still working on since the set is not fully complete yet that will release, probably next week, that goes into a lot of the behind the scenes. If you saw the first video we did about 10 or 11 days ago where this was just an empty room that we were in, and me and Paul were sitting there and just putting together a computer, putting together monitors, waiting for Comcast, a lot more happened, and there's even some a lot of glass breakage, but you'll have to wait to see what I mean by that.
Yeah. So, with that being said, guys, I think we should start this show up, get ready things make things ready to happen.
Get the ball rolling.
Get the ball rolling. So, our first story that we're going to be talking about are nurses on strike and how the hospital is using a shady move to make them look bad. So, around 2,300 nurses at the University of Chicago Medical Center are preparing to go on strike Friday, citing issues of short staff, unsafe working conditions, and forced overtime. The medical center, which is affiliated with a university that has a multi-billion-dollar endowment and which recently undertook an expansion proposed at $269 million, is refusing to negotiate a contract with the nurses who are represented by National Nurses United. We actually, a long time ago when we were on radio, actually interviewed a representative from National Nurses United. On September 13th, a post on an official-looking site called usmcnurses.org, which represents the interests of the administration, tried to undermine the union and the strike by calling a trip by union leaders out of town shameless behavior. So then later that day, facing criticism, the medical center circulated a communication strategy, including a change in tone in messaging with union members and talking points that suggest focusing on how the impending one-day strike is already affecting patients. There are 3 bullet points listed: transfer of critically ill infants, drastically decrease access to care of the south side of Chicago, and canceling surgery and procedures. The medical center has already begun moving babies and children to intensive care to other hospitals, according to an internal memo which is obtained by The Intercept. The hospital administration is urging management to talk to nurses. Managers are the only ones with individual relationship with frontline nurses and need not to shy away from difficult conversations, but need to help the nurses understand the organization's perspectives. Using the transferring of critically ill premature infants as a shameless example, the memo then suggests, Marty Smith, Midwest Director of National Nurses Organizing Committee, National Nurses United, agrees it's unfortunate that the hospital has to move critically ill patients elsewhere, but said that the patient transfers are the results of management's refusal to sit down and address their staffers' concerns. The union's contract expired in April. Negotiations broke down late Wednesday, so the nurses are officially set to strike on Friday morning, which is today. The last time they tried to strike was in 2015. They reached an agreement with management shortly before the planned labor action. Since January 2017, nurses at the University of Chicago Medical Center have filed at least 1,500 reports to management about unsafe conditions related to staffing. Nurses say the hospital demands that they work outside their field of expertise. Why are they doing that? Why are they making those nurses do that? Instead of hiring more nurses, they also say that staffers are forced to work overtime after completing 12-hour shifts, which increases the risk to patient safety. In 2015, the university reopened adult trauma care unit at its medical center following years of protests sparked by the death of 18-year-old organizer Damian Turner. The youth activist was shot just blocks away from the medical center, but due to protocol, was taken nearly 9 miles away to Northwestern Memorial Hospital. More than 5,500 nurses at hospitals in Arizona, California, and Florida intend to join the University of Chicago Medical Center nurses and strike on September 20th, according to National Nurses United. Another talking point listed in the memo suggests managers really need to reinforce the duplicity of saying you want staffing ratios to ensure patients are safe while calling for a strike at the same time as dozens of other hospitals across the country to decrease the number of replacement nurses available. Nurses do one-day strikes precisely to minimize the impact on the community, Smith noted, and the medical center has just chosen to maximize the impact on the community. She also noted that there are temporary nurses that have been hired by the university, and they're being paid more than what staffers normally make, in addition to paying for their travel expenses and meals. The University of Chicago Medical Center did not return a request for comment by The Intercept. Earlier this week, a coalition of unions representing more than 80,000 nurses and medical workers at Kaiser Permanente announced that they will be striking out in October in what is poised to be the nation's biggest strike since 1997. They cite issues of staffing, worker safety, wages, and benefits. So these are nurses who are basically telling management it's unsafe. You're not paying us enough. You're not giving us enough benefits. You're making us work overtime. You're making us a risk to patients, and you're not giving us a chance to really, not only do quality service, but make sure patients are taken care of. And you have management, which is basically owned by a major corporation, apparently, that's turning a blind eye to it. This is what Bernie Sanders has been fighting for. He's been fighting for single-payer health care and making sure that first responders, nurses, and doctors are able to care for sick patients. This is why we got to get money out of politics, and this is why we really, really have to reform our system. Guys, I want to open up the floor to you.
So this is unsurprising in America. Wait, we're saying that there's a situation in America, the most equal, generous country in the world, where the people that do a huge amount of work to make sure patients are taken care of it's like doctors come in and out, nurses are the ones that are there for you most of the time, and they're not getting paid. They're being told to work in fields. I can't think of a more unsafe thing to do than to require people to work in fields that they're not trained in. And the hospital has the gall to say, well, I mean, they're not being there for a day because they're minimizing, the chance that things go wrong.
All the while moving sick patients and infants and premature infants to other hospitals, making them more at risk of dying or suffering even further.
So if the hospital wants to play this type of game, I mean, nurses have been very kind. Like I said, we were covering workers that were, which company? GM workers that are on strike right now? So the nurses have been very kind in that they're saying, hey, we're really doing something to show how important what we're doing is, and we're going to go on strike for just one day. Now, if I'm the nurses or the nurses union, and I'm being very considerate, I'm sure that they've been asking for these changes for years, and they've been not getting them, and they've probably actually had the stuff cut, so it's probably even gone the other direction. If the hospital then wants to throw a negative PR at some of the most important staff working for them, why not extend it a week?
Yeah.
Why not do more? If the hospital is going to play hardball when nurses have been nothing but patient, as kind of goes with their job description, why not do more? That's my question.
One of the things that really bugs me about this is, to your point exactly, these nurses are trying to minimize the risk to the community from their strike. And yeah, it's almost certainly been a great deal of time since they brought up their grievances. Remember, there is the Taft-Hartley Act that basically says you're not allowed to strike unless you give, I forget what it is. It's like 180 days notice or something crazy. Like you can't just go on strike. There's a process by which you do this. So these kind of actions on the part of the hospital are low, right?
Yeah.
To first of all, hire at a higher wage and pay travel expenses, other nurses, which I don't know, the article didn't seem to indicate to me that they were under.
Well, what
There are
they
probably a lot of retired nurses.
Okay,
would
so
be my guess.
So the article, which is from the Intercept, it's in our show notes. Just check it out in the in the description box and on our YouTube page. The article states that these are temporary staffers, so they have some medical expertise. Like
They're
you-
probably
yeah.
also not trained in the fields that they're being hired for as well.
Yes, and the thing is, it's interesting that this university is able to do an expansion project, and they got corporate donors backing them up. They got billionaires in their hip back pocket, but they don't have the resources necessary to take care of the very same people who are providing patient care, the very same people who are just trying to ensure that people are able to be taken care of. I mean, again, when I look at something like this, I just can't help but just get a little bit angry about how everything is just like falling apart. Especially when nurses are on the front line in a lot of hospitals area, and it's just this is why we need to reform our system.
My concern here, though, is also not concern. The thing I want to point out is these people that are going to take the places, the strike breakers, the scabs. Don't do that. Don't do that.
Mm-hmm.
Don't undermine a worker's fight for a better life, for better wages, for better negotiating power. Don't do that. That's my point.
Yeah, so I think that this goes into what we've always been talking about, that workers need to stand with workers, but at the same time, I'm sure the people that are going in to replace them, also, if they're retired, I'm sure their pension or their retirement package isn't good enough and they need the money for whatever reason because they're not paid enough to begin with, which is the entire point that got brought up. Or perhaps these are people that are just simply not skilled to begin with for these tasks, and these are people that might otherwise only make $10, $15 an hour. So this is like, there's a lot of desperate people out there. So as much as it's like stand with workers and that is the right thing to do, many people are, they also need to feed themselves. And that's another critique of the system that got us here in the first place.
Mm-hmm. All right. Yeah. Very good point. But now, Daniel, moving on to another story, and this is something that really shows what's happening in the political environment, and that is Senator Bernie Sanders. Why don't you introduce it?
Yeah, so this is a lot of fun. So we have Senator Sanders has made another record in terms of speed. The presidential campaign of Bernie Sanders has made political history on Thursday by receiving campaign donations from 1 million individuals in the shortest period of time. This is, and I'm going to read a quote from this, with 1 million contributors, this is the only Democratic campaign that has more supporters than Donald Trump, said campaign manager in a statement. Our strength is in our numbers, he continued, and that is why Bernie Sanders is the only candidate who is able to say his campaign will rely on grassroots funding in both the primary against Donald Trump. So this is important because we've talked before about who people are connected to and how important it is for candidate, because everyone, no matter what campaign you have, whether you're Bernie or anyone else, it's a formula. You are tied to and have to be loyal to the people who give you money. So if you're taking a lot of grassroots money and 25% PAC money, you're still going to be pretty tied to the businesses because, a check for $100,000 or $1 million is much easier to cash in on than 10,000 people giving the same amount. So let's continue. So of the 1 million individuals who have given, according to the campaign, only 0.5% have given the maximum amount, which means they're not allowed to spend any more money. I believe the cap is $2,800, double that for couples. And, a lot of times, like Pete Buttigieg has this exact problem. He got capped out from the beginning. He has a lot of money now, but he's not making a lot more. Whereas as they go on, 99.5% are able to give again multiple times. The campaign has also announced that more than 125,000 people are giving every month. And what is his campaign rate now at about, what is it, like $17 or so? I think that's what they were saying around there. So if you have that many people, that's well over $1 million you can rely on, like almost over $1 million every single month. And you may have other candidates who are also getting grassroots support but have not verified that they're going to do so solely in general elections. You have a lot of people who just aren't going down that route at all and going to big donor fundraisers. There's only so many rich people that are willing to spend $2,800 a person. There's only so many $1,000 plate dinners you can go to.
And who wants to really go to that? Spend $1,000 to have a steak dinner.
People that want a return on investment.
Yeah,
because one thing we've also learned is from 2012 to 2016 or somewhere in there, a 4-year period, lobbyists spent $4 billion on Congress and presidency, and they got $4 trillion out of it. So if you're a business person, you don't really have any moral scruples, or you're just going along in a similar way we're talking about those strike breakers, you just have to keep up with the competition. 1,000 to 1 return on investment is maybe the best investment you can make. So people do. So going back to Sanders, the most donations he's gotten from are the rank and file workers from Walmart, Starbucks, and Amazon. Important to note, Amazon, he got them a $15 minimum wage. It seems like Sanders continues to grow, but he's growing with working people the media generally doesn't care about at all, so that isn't talked about. We have a lot of different things. We were talking before the show, the interest of how the media is talking about other candidates right now and how they're growing, but it's exactly what we predicted on our show 6 months ago, a year ago. It's the same prediction. First, they threw Biden, see if he sticks. He's still kind of sticking, but he's sliding off. You can see that happening. You can see Buttigieg thrown against the wall, slid off. Beto thrown against the wall, slid off. Kamala Harris, everyone. The people that they really have now, it is a big three that's left. It's Sanders, Warren, and Biden. You have people like Andrew Yang, who continues to grow. You have Tulsi Gabbard, who continues to grow, whereas everyone but those 5 people is generally shrinking. Bill de Blasio just pulled out of the race. And we had a very interesting talk before the show with Paul about...
Yeah. Why don't you take it away, Paul?
Yeah, so this was a weird thing that dovetails nicely with this story that I brought up. So Bernie Sanders, I guess this is yesterday, tweeted, the cat is out of the bag. The corporate wing of the Democratic Party is publicly, quote, anybody but Bernie. They know our progressive agenda of Medicare for all, breaking up the big banks, taking on drug companies, and raising wages is the real threat to the billionaire class. And he's retweeting a Politico article saying centrists are coming around to Elizabeth Warren as an alternative to Bernie Sanders. So there were a couple of responses to this. People were saying, look at all the responses. People are really mad about this tweet. And I was like, what is there to be mad about? That's what he always says. It's totally true and accurate. And why would people be mad about this? And it's basically centrist Democrats who are mad about it. So Christine Teigen, actually, people earlier in the show were saying that they were having difficulty hearing this mic. So give us a 1 in the chat if the mic is okay.
Apparently, people are saying that's true, so it's all working. So
send us a 1 anyway. We like the feedback.
Yeah, we do like the feedback.
Yeah,
please let us know. We're trying to get the kinks out. We're almost there, folks. Almost there.
Yeah, there's hand waving going on about mics. I'm not sure if I'm being heard.
No, it's good. No, keep it on you. So continue on.
Yeah. So Christine Teigen, who is an actress, I believe, or a model.
Someone that we obviously care deeply about politics, and yeah, right, of course, yes.
I don't understand why she's taken, so, I don't want to say seriously, I mean, it's given a lot of gravitas, what she said, and I don't really know why, but she says, this is not a good tweet. You're getting a lot of shit for this, even from people who like you. That says something. Now, I didn't see that. I didn't see Bernie fans coming out of the woodwork to say, no, Bernie, don't say.
Paul, let's do it this way. I mean, let's do it really fair and even. Paul, why don't you read Bernie Sanders' quotes? And as someone who's very familiar with Bernie Sanders, let me react in real time to this tweet to assert the absurdity of the tweet.
Also, real quick too, Dana Fairbanks has stated this, and I've noticed this problem on Twitter too. I am unable to view any responses to that tweet, and I've been noticing for a lot of
People were
progressives.
saying that.
Yes, it's happening a lot. And again, this is why we say double check and triple check that you're subscribed to us and you follow us on our social media pages.
But with that said,
go on.
let's read
Continue.
the tweet.
All right, so
let's put the camera right on me. I'm gonna make sure, as the Sanders guy knows a lot about Sanders, I'm gonna react and figure out how absurd this tweet is.
The cat is out of the bag. The corporate wing of the Democratic Party is publicly, quote, anybody but Bernie.
Bernie would never say that. That's not anything that would ever follow the Bernie Sanders campaign. I am shocked. Go ahead,
They
Paul.
know our progressive agenda of Medicare for all, breaking up the big banks, taking on drug
That
companies.
doesn't sound like Bernie Sanders, I
and
know.
raising wages is the real threat to the billionaire
That's
class.
not. Bernie Sanders always wants to cut wages. I don't know why he's saying he's going to raise wages. That's so different.
I know, super out of character,
I am-
right?
I
don't
so
understand.
shocked.
I am.
Hold on.
Bernie Sanders, what have you done? You've said what you've always said for 40 years. You're just saying it again, and people are acting as if it's a big thing. This is what I mean. A lot of people are getting on this bandwagon that Bernie is somehow doing poorly when he continues. He just broke the record for the most donations, and people are acting like he's sliding away. He's still climbing up the polls, and people are still acting like he's falling because the news media, in their infinite wisdom and infinite resources and infinite scare tactics, when we've said before, they're fine. I mean, maybe they're not fine with, like Warren, they really do have issues with Wall Street, seems to have issues with her as well, even though she's gone and met with them. But
And
they
is willing to
really
take corporate
do
PAC
not
money.
want Bernie Sanders. It is an anyone but Bernie situation. It's so intense I hit the mic. And I don't know what's news about this. This is something that we've talked about forever. This seems like the story of 2016 when it was new. Maybe then it was new. But he's doing fine. He has base support that's mostly shared with Biden, who's dropping. And it's mainly going to come to Sanders. You have support with Tulsi. That's very much shared. Like I said in previous live stream, if there's any two campaigns that have the closest supporters, it's Bernie and Tulsi. So anything Tulsi has, if we get to a point and she doesn't win the primary, that's going to move over to Sanders. Yang, I said this a year ago, he's the wild card. He's going to pull about 5% of millennials, which is something that's going to affect Sanders. And the amount that he does is going to be important. So you have a little pull here, a little pull here. You have a big pull from Biden. He will have over 50% if those people are not in the picture or if they join his campaign or something along the lines. But it's really with Biden. So for all the people out there, this is what we've been saying would happen for the last year. It's happening exactly like we expected. The big thing I was saying behind the scenes is what I expect to make the difference is the recession that will come during the primary. And if that happens, Sanders is going to win. It's that simple. If it doesn't happen on time, which I will be very surprised by, but, the Fed has, this week put almost $250 billion into markets for the banks because they're the same markets that were the precursor to 2008 collapsing. This week they've been putting, we had an article, $53 billion in a $75 billion, $75 billion, $75 billion. What's important about the $75 billion on that is that's the maximum the Fed can put in in a given day. So they're putting in a quarter. The economy's fine, I'm sure. When the economy goes to shit, all things change. Everyone's priorities change. Sanders' message, which has been getting a lot of issues by people who still have jobs and are told the economy's great. Everything changes. The marketplace of ideas itself that we're living in right now in this very second will be somewhat irrelevant in a recession. And Sanders will be able to take advantage of that. That's what I've been saying for a year. If there's no recession, I don't think Sanders has the advantage. If there is a recession, he wins.
Yeah. So here's the thing. I'm reading a couple things in the chat right now. Lizzie Chan has stated this. If someone donates, they are likely to show up to the polls. Hearing God speak, Biden must say bye and be done. And then Density McCartney says the mainstream media controls brain dead morons. And everyone else is saying this too, that Bernie Sanders has gaining momentum. And it goes on to something else. Look, who has been consistent for 40 plus years in American politics that's currently running for the Democratic nomination. It's Senator Bernie Sanders. He's been on point. He's been correct on a lot of issues that a majority of name-recognized Democrats have been wrong on for years. Bernie Sanders has been in support with the LGBTQ community. Bernie Sanders has been calling out the corruption of big banks, Wall Street, and major corporations. Bernie Sanders has been talking about climate change. Bernie Sanders has been talking about the impact of money in politics, and so much more. We have the information at our fingertips, and working-class people from different backgrounds all across the country, even of different political points of view, are supporting Bernie Sanders. He has what it takes to build a coalition. And the very fact that he is getting to this momentum too, and corporate media is just trying to hush it and keep it quiet.
He's failing.
Yeah.
He's
How?
gonna
How
fall
is he
away.
failing?
He's gone irrelevant. He's not doing anything. He just so happens to be getting the most donations, continues to be growing, is leading in California, is doing really well in Iowa, and has the experience from running a previous campaign versus Biden, who's lost 2 campaigns and not even
1988
close.
and 2008.
Not even close. Like Bernie Sanders got, again, no one knew who he was, and he got within 10% by the end of a primary against everything that the Clintons were able to throw at him. Warren, I'm holding off on Warren because a lot of things are dealing with it, but Warren has some issues we've expressed before. But right now, there's no point in having Bernie and Warren people fight. That's what it comes down to for me. I hope, and I would love to have a scenario where it ends up being between Bernie and Warren. What a spoil of riches for us.
Yeah,
That'd be good, but I mean, on some level, I don't want to feel like we're coming out of nowhere when it ends up that Bernie and Warren are kind of the last two standing, and we have to be like, yeah, but guys, Warren's got the issues.
Yeah, and here's
but again, like right now, I agree completely with that statement. But right now, I think that we still have to follow the tag team mentality. I think that the amount of fighting I've seen between Warren and Bernie people needs to stop, just because it's not helpful strategically. Now, we get to a spot where it's between. That's when it really should come out, and that's when we're going to be more vocal.
It's going to happen
But
sooner or
right
later.
now, if Warren and Bernie people fight each other, that helps Biden. That helps the establishment, and neither of us want that. So there's going to be a fight between Bernie and Warren. Let's just do it at the time that makes sense, which is later. Right now, we have a bunch of other people. We have Joe Biden. We have a lot of stuff happening. Let the Bernie-Warren fight happen when it needs to.
Yeah.
Let's be friends for now. That's where I'm coming at.
Yeah, and that's a perfect note to end it on, because, look, at the end of the day, you know, when you look at all the candidates up there, do you want Biden to get the nomination? No. And yes, I have extreme criticism of Warren as well, but a fight between Sanders and Warren, not yet. It will happen. But if it does happen soon, then Biden comes out on top, and I think
Then we're fucked.
Then it's a disaster.
Yeah.
Then it is a disaster. And look, Sanders is my first choice, so I'm just going to keep it at that. But Paul, we're going to move on to the next story, and should we panic or not panic?
Aren't we all trying to figure that out?
Okay, let's go ahead.
Story
Paul,
of
take
our
it away.
lives.
So this is a deep dive from Mint Press News. I really like to do the Mint Press thing. I'm on the wrong camera. Sorry.
Oh,
That's me.
There we go.
Push buttons, wrong buttons. So this is from Mint Press, and it's talking about the escalation with war against Iran. So people are well aware at this point, it was about a week ago now, that Saudi oil production fields were bombed by numerous drones and missile strikes, long-range missile strikes. So the Houthis, the rebels in Yemen, have taken responsibility for the attack, or they have claimed responsibility for the attack, and the United States has obviously said, oh yeah, it was Iran, not the people that are claiming that they did the attack. It's Iran, it's people who are adamantly saying that they did not do the attack. Okay.
What? That doesn't sound
Yeah,
right.
Yeah,
Super weird.
me and Kira talked about this on the Wednesday show.
Yeah.
And it's like, hey, we did the crime. We're us over here. Look
Right.
at us.
It's the other guy that we have political ramifications that we want to deal with.
Right. So one of the things, so it's interesting, Pompeo pointed out that, but the oil fields were bombed on the west and northwest sides, not from the south, where Yemen is located. And you're like, oh, shit, it isn't from the south. But wait a minute. Like, if I saw somebody get shot in the head, does that mean that their attacker was above them? Also, Iran is not to the west or the northwest of Saudi Arabia. It's to the northeast.
Uh-oh.
So-
Paul, are you using geography?
Yeah, so that doesn't really add up at all. So what the Houthis were saying was that they had inside intelligence about locations of the oil fields in Saudi Arabia from Saudi Sunni, not Sunni, but Shia sympathizers. So there's an estimated 15 to 20% Shia population in Saudi Arabia that would be amenable to helping the Yemenis kind of try to come out from underneath this 4-year-long war that has left millions of people dead in their own country, has starved their civilians, has left people malnourished.
I want to say, though, Paul, to be completely fair, when children at Mass are dying of starvation or they get blown up in their bus when they're going to school or a field trip or whatever, it's a thing that just happens, and it's like nothing to worry about. But when oil gets blown up and production in the world is dropped by 1%, this is why we have to go to war.
Hey, man, we're addicted to that stuff. It's like cocaine to the American economy.
Really is like a coke addict with oil. I mean, it really is.
Yeah, well, it's really pathetic, too, because, again, this is something that was planned in the early days of the war on terror, an eventual invasion of Iran. And why do we want to invade them? Why does the U.S. military and the military-industrial complex want to invade? It's for money, profit, fear, and to keep the corporate media running their neoliberal, neoconservative message of control and fear and making all of you afraid of the other. If history, I just like to rewind back the clocks. In 1950, Iran actually had a democracy. Now, you would think, and I don't care what your political ideology is, whether Democrat, liberal, Republican, etc. In theory, we should all be applauding that. There was a democracy in Iran. But what did the U.S. government, with the CIA, British, and American oil industries do? We overthrew a democracy and replaced it with the Shah of Iran, a dictator who only worked with his corporate interests and the American and British corporate interests.
And remember, in terms of allies, did Iran attack us on 9/11? No, with Saudi Arabia. Are we allies with Iran? No, we're allied with Saudi Arabia.
So try and figure that out.
None of it matters, and none of the talking points matter, but I'll leave it to you, Paul.
Yeah, continue, Paul.
So obviously the Trump administration, blaming Iran, announced it was imposing more sanctions on Iran, and voices close to the Trump administration are calling for military action. Mint Press News says this attack should lead to the opposite response. Urgent calls for an immediate end to the war in Yemen and an end to U.S. economic warfare against Iran. Now, interestingly, they point out China has chimed in and said that they really do not want any military tensions. And China is an interesting party in this because they have diplomatic ties with both Saudi Arabia and Iran. So while they're not as extended into the Middle East as the United States or Great Britain are, that I thought was really telling. So another thing that was interesting in this opinion article is at the very end, he says, if Americans fail to speak out now, we may discover too late that our failure to rein in our venal, warmongering ruling class has led us to the brink of World War III. We hope this crisis will instead awaken the sleeping giant, the too silent majority of peace-loving Americans who speak up decisively for peace and force Trump to put the interests and the will of the American people above those in his unscrupulous allies, or those of his unscrupulous allies. And this is a point that I make a lot. People in the United States, in general, when given kind of a black or white scenario, are you in general for war or in general for peace? That's kind of a no-brainer. Most people are like, well, yeah, I'm in general for peace. But when you dismantle it, the reasons for war, the reasons for the endless war that we're in the Middle East in particular, the reasons for our jingoistic bullying position in South America are all intertwined. It is a system that cannot be at peace for too long. It is a system that requires the constant threat and action of war to perpetuate itself. And this is the American empire. This is where we're at. And so one of the things that's required to get to a point of saying we do need peace, I'm going to actively advocate for it, is, I need to be okay with the fact that the United States is not going to be the monopolar, hegemonic arbiter of all things in the world. We need to not sit on our top spot and tell everyone what we're going to do for fear of a nuke going at their country. We need to just not do that anymore.
Yeah.
And this is something I've said before on exactly that note. All empires eventually fall. The U.S. is in a very good position in that we're at the late stage of our empire. Cracks are showing. It's why it's so hard for us to keep things in control. Internally, things are amiss because no one can afford food. I mean, we're a rich country that acts like it's very poor because people are so starving in such high
But
levels.
Daniel, we need our joint strike fighter that can't fly at night, okay?
Exactly.
So
But
how
that's
dare
exactly
you
right.
talk common
Because
sense?
everything is moving in a very set direction. So the U.S. has two options. It can either push this as far as it can, go into Iran, keep going, go into Venezuela, keep extending itself until ultimately, just like Great Britain, just like Rome, just like every empire before, it collapses and there is a great turmoil and loss of power in the world. The economy falls apart and everything just contracts. And probably China, with an alliance with Russia, but really just China, becomes the new empire. It's the new person. Or the U.S. can pick a second option and realize that it is terminal and choose the method of its falling. Choose who gets the power. Choose how to share that power with China, with India, with all these other, with the EU. And then at least the U.S. doesn't crash land into a crater, but it has a nice kind of maintaining, gliding path. And I think another thing that Kit always brings up, and I think it's a good point in the future, is at some point the U.S. will need help. At some point,
yeah.
we're not going to be the hegemonic power. And look at how people treat Russia when Russia asks for help. We make fun of them, we chastise them, and their GDP is less than South Korea's. What kind of fall does the U.S. empire want? Does it want a Soviet Union fall where China and the EU, but a lot of China, takes over? Or does it want to stay in the big boys club and not fall like Russia did?
And see, here's the thing, because I've mentioned on the show that someday we might need help. I know it seems shocking, but things happen. Let's look at a long set history of humanity and empires. Empires and all their emperors and kings and tyrants always assumed that they'd be around forever and that they would rule for forever, but that's not the case. That's not human nature. That's not how humans build things. Anything that humanity has built is destined to fall apart. It's our nature. But we have another path. Look, and it's you guys, everyone watching, everyone talking to your friends and neighbors, and actually eventually stepping outside your bubble and talking to people that you probably wouldn't engage with. We have a chance here in the United States to actually build a better future. We can't rely on the RNC and DNC establishment, Wall Street, big banks. The 1%, they're going to lead us to disaster. The real people who have power are all of you. We can integrate and re-enter into the international community and actually turn the course of history. But we have to step up and get involved. And that's why this 2020 election cycle is going to be important. And for me, the only progressive independent candidate that can actually bring in that change is Bernie Sanders. But guess what? Bernie Sanders will not be around forever, and he can't do this by himself. He's going to need us, all of us. And that's why we're trying to do this here with Hardlands Media. That's how me and Daniel and Paul met. That's how we actually got things done with Wolfpack, Illinois, by getting SJR 42 passed. It just has to be all of us. We have to step up. We have to get involved. And I know it seems scary, but when we started Hardlands Media, we had a Galaxy S7 cell phone. And we were scared. We didn't know what to do. We didn't know about editing or anything else. And now look at us now. We took that step. All of you have to do the same thing too. And all of you have what it takes to really push forward. And I know it because we can all do things. We are incredible, and I believe in our strength. But we have to get involved. Fight for that better future. Don't be that person who says that they wish they could have helped. In some way, some form, you can contribute. And that's why we got to avoid a war with Iran, because it will be our deathbed.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right.
No war with Iran. Hashtag no war with Iran.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean it was you.
Don't go to war
Yeah.
with the guys that said they weren't involved in the thing, and keep ignoring the guys who said they did. That's the other thing. That's to go all the way back, just I know, full circle
Yeah.
to this story. This is happening because Yemen's like, yeah, we did this thing, and everyone's like, oh, that's very funny. We're going to keep ignoring you like we have for years.
But these missiles came from Iran.
And that was the other really interesting thing. I was actually listening to NPR while I was driving, and even the expert that they had on was like, yeah, no, Yemen's been so destroyed. They really have no command and control function. They have, like, even if he's basically said, even if Iran's like, okay, we're going to get the Yemen to do this and we're going to order it. Yemen is it's been so destroyed.
A genocide paid by the American taxpayer.
The command and control of it has been so wiped out that even if Iran wanted to plan this and set this up in Yemen, they wouldn't be able to because there just wouldn't be a way for them to get it done because there's so little organization. At the same time, hasn't the U.S. military been saying for years, hey guys, we got to worry about these drones. They're getting cheaper and easier to use. Anyone could do them. And it's like, you mean like a country like Yemen can put together like kamikaze drones. I'm sure that anyone that has their own remote control drone that they buy for $1,000 could put something similar together. So, I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
I know we're getting ready to move on from the story, but
Well, actually, we're going to be going up to a follow-up story.
one other little tidbit, though, that I forgot I had read in here, and you mentioned earlier, where you're saying, oh, how God forbid 1% oil production was down temporarily in Saudi Arabia. They mentioned that in this article, that Saudi oil production was essentially halved from about 10 million barrels a day to about 5 million barrels per day. And that they will be back up to the full 10 million barrels by the end of the month.
We should
So
definitely go to war with Iran.
Wow.
Definitely.
Right, halved their production for 3 weeks. That's what we're about to go to war over. And what we're saying is, oh, well, these missiles were provided by Iran, and so we need to retaliate against Iran. It's like, okay, by that logic, though,
We should be at war with
shouldn't
America.
Yemen be firing missiles at America because we're giving them to Saudi Arabia?
No, even further. America should declare war on America because America provided arms to the Saudis, who provided arms to Al-Qaeda, who flew planes into buildings that we then went to invade Iraq over.
And Afghanistan.
So shouldn't America be invading America?
Shit,
under
we're
that
the
same
terrorists.
Logic? Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I mean, that's the thing. It's like if you really look at it, we're either the number one or number two terrorist funding organization in the world, depending on how you count Saudi Arabia or America.
So here's something that should boil everyone's blood. You know the genocide that is happening in Yemen when we destabilize Libya, continue to escalate the Syrian civil war, the invasion of Iraq and Afghanistan. Do you want to know who paid for that? The American taxpayer. That's right. You helped pay for it. And because of that, that's why we have to get involved and step up our game and make sure to tell these politicians that we're done with money in politics and we're done with these foreign wars. You know, there's a candidate that's running that's constantly being smeared by corporate media, Tulsi Gabbard, who's actually making that one of the main issues that she's running on. So, you know.
How dare she?
How dare she speak truth to power? I don't know. But now we're moving on.
She's not a real progressive.
Yeah.
Knowing what a real progressive is when there's no solid definition.
Yeah, what is the definition? I don't know. It's ridiculous. But now moving on.
I'd read the term actually came from Communist Party USA in like the 30s.
So I'm also reading some things in the chat. Arnie Burns, OMG, brilliant. America declares war on America. And in Norman Kina, La French resistance may have slowed one single railway train of gas. Oh, all right.
Yeah.
All
No,
right.
that's a fair quote. That's like if Yemen. Oh well, actually, it is. Yeah. Never mind.
Okay, Americans
It makes the
invading
point. It makes
America
the
is an
point.
achievable goal. Says Zeus, how do you pay for not
it's so
throwing
easy.
money
the
at
military's
the
already there
mic?
to occupy.
Okay. Okay, so Chez Zeus says, but how do you pay for not throwing money at the MIC, at the mic?
How do you pay for not spending money? Well,
Yeah.
I think you just solved with world money.
Yeah, there we go.
Congratulations.
Yeah, and there we go. And Dingo Ate My Baby says this. They probably ordered a $1,000 drone off of Amazon and then strapped some C4 on it.
It probably only. I mean, it's Yemen, yeah, but it probably took them about a week to get there, so that's pretty good. I mean, any person could have been like, I got these explosives. I have 3 or 4 drones that I got off Amazon. Put them together. You knock out.
But let's be honest, Amazon doesn't deliver to Yemen. They probably bought it from Alibaba.
Somewhere.
Yeah.
So now doing a follow-up story to this, because this kind of goes into a concern that myself and Daniel and Paul have brought up where, look, Iran is dealing with these very harsh sanctions where you have people who are unable to get medicine, food, fresh, clean water, material needed to build their infrastructure. And the thing is, if you're the Iranian government and the Iranian people, and you're in a desperate situation where the United States military-industrial complex, Israel, Saudi Arabia, are basically out to set to invade you, destabilize your government, and cause chaos, you can't fight them all. Yes, you can push back, but you're not going to win. So what's your next step logic?
It's like
Well,
it's really like Rome. It really is like the Roman Empire. I mean, we really are.
But
the
but
Roman
here's the
Empire.
thing. What is your next step? You want to look for somebody who perhaps will fight for you or back you up or give you something to ensure that you are not going to be in so much trouble. So it's sort of like a kid in the schoolyard. Look, there's always a famous saying of, yeah, you got to step up to your bully. But there's also the other occasion where said kid who's being bullied asks another bully to fight for him on his cause. And look, it happens. And so what's Iran's logic right now? They're asking help from Russia and China. And right now, this is an article from Forbes magazine.
Super quick before you get into that, I'm going to read DCK Punk's. It was a $15,000 drone, which, if I'll remind people, is 15% the cost of one U.S. smart bomb. So $15,000 in a war is basically something a militia could put together. Not even a rich American, an American with a reverse mortgage could pull this off.
Yeah, exactly. So, so here's an article from Forbes magazine. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo called violent attacks on Saudi Arabia oil infrastructure an act of war, as evidence suggests that Iran is the culprit. I'm surprised that this is Forbes magazine, of course. They're going to say Iran is the culprit. This marks the most dangerous escalation between the United States and Iran since the seizure of the American embassy in Tehran. Wow, night and day between those two things. And there's a reason why that embassy was taken over in the first place, because it was a reaction towards the United States supporting a dictator, and a new government was put in power. Of course, it was an extremist government, but nonetheless, there's reasons why it happened in the first place. However, this confrontation has major implications for the growing U.S.-China strategic rivalry. Amidst historic U.S.-Iran tensions, Beijing is now doubling down on its strategic partnership with Tehran, ignoring U.S. efforts to isolate the Islamic Republic from global markets. Following an August visit by Iranian Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif to Beijing, the two countries agreed to update a 25-year program signed in 2016 to include an unprecedented $400 billion of investment in the Iranian economy. Sanctions be damned. So basically, the Chinese firms will maintain the right, the first refusal to participate in any and all petrochemical projects in Iran, including the provision of technology, systems, process ingredients, and personnel required to complete such projects. According to the exclusive interview with Petroleum Economist, a senior source in Iranian's petrochemical sector had this to say about the new agreement. The central pillar of the New Deal is that China will invest $280 billion developing Iran's oil, gas, and petrochemical sectors. There will be another $120 billion investment in upgrading Iran's transport and manufacturing infrastructure, which again can be front-loaded into the first 5-year period and added to in each subsequent period should both parties agree. The Trump policy is a 180-degree U-turn from the sanctions relief granted by the previous administration's joint comprehensive plan of action. The Obama brainchild intended to temporarily freeze the Iranian nuclear program, but ignored its regional power projection and growing missile arsenal. Under the agreement, Iran's economy rebounded by over 12% compared to when sanctions were in full force. Wow, Iran's economy is recovering after decades of, decades of sanctions.
How dare they? We need to keep saying their economy's terrible. How are we going to do that if it's rebounding? Tell me, how are we going to do that?
Well, here, check this
Lie
out.
through your teeth?
More from the Forbes article. The country's oil output, the lifeblood of the economy, dropped from almost 4 million barrels per day in 2018 to barely above 2.5 billion barrels per day.
Wait, time out.
2.5 million.
Didn't we just read from the U.S. that if you drop a country's oil by 50%, you're declaring war on that country? Did I mishear that?
Yeah.
Because it sounds like they're saying that Iran, because of sanctions, has lost about 50% of the oil it can produce.
Yeah.
So, I'm just saying.
So war with China?
No. This is in March this year, and the exports declined to a trickle. Given Iran's precarious geopolitical and geoeconomic position, it has little choice but to forego a closer relationship with China, despite the country's reputation as a predatory lender. Russia, too, is a major Iranian partner, weapons and nuclear, rocket, and military technology supplier. Also, again, according to the Middle East Monitor, the agreement also confers the right to delay the payment of these prices for 2 years in the Chinese national currency, the yuan. This presents an extremely favorable situation for the Chinese, as Beijing earns yuan from its projects across Africa and Central Asia, and therefore does not need to make oil trades in the United States dollar. So, wow. China's ignoring the U.S. dollar.
And this is another way that the U.S. empire collapses. It's so precarious at this point. Like I said, it's just like ancient Rome at the peak of it, modern A.D. Rome, not B.C. But this, you can't go to war with the Gauls, you can't go to war in Britain, you can't go to war with everyone at once. It's going to fail, and then China rises.
but there's also one. The article then goes on to this. The deal facilitates Iran's quest to become a regional and nuclear-armed hegemon. What evidence are you proving on that? I think the only thing I'm getting from this is that Iran needs that $400 billion investment to rebuild its infrastructure after so many years of suffering under U.S. sanctions. I mean, what more
and
can...
now
what-
China has the ability to get oil, which of course they want to grow their economy.
Right.
And because of the U.S. and Trump's precariousness on the diplomatic front, what's America going to do about it? Sanction China a little more and see what happens? Move us closer to another recession? Whereas Iran is like, we'll sell any amount to you. We really need to sell this oil. We're giving China power. It's the exact same as any political cancel. It's just America is hastening its own decline.
Well, pointing out we already have sanctions on China and on Iran
and on Russia.
and on Russia.
So it's like, they're going to listen to everything the U.S. does. No problem. What are you going to do?
Right. So one of the weird things to me is this is China doing what China always does, right? Which is go in, try to build inroads with economic trade, try and offer support, infrastructure support, financial support. It's a war. It's an economic war in China's mind, and they're being effective here. They're filling a need in Iran where they have to get their infrastructure functioning at a level that they can continue to be self-sustaining. And this doing deals in oil in the yuan is something the U.S. hates, and China is super okay with getting under our skin.
Yeah, well, they don't care. I mean, here's the thing, Paul. It's like, put yourself in the Iranian government situation. I mean, you are dealing with the United States, with its two allies, Israel and Saudi Arabia.
The nuclear deal to begin with.
Yeah, again, we have to remember they need help. So if you are in Iran's position, well, who's going to help you that has some form of power, either economically or with military assets? And it's going to be Russia and China. And you're going to ask those two countries for help and trade agreements and alliances. And look, if there is a military conflict, there is a very good chance that Iran and China could bring in like some resources necessary for the Iranian government and military to push back against a potential U.S. invasion. But there's another thing, too, another danger, that if the United States continues wants to push this, let's put a hypothetical scenario. Let's say Russia and China want to build 2 military bases in Iran. And let's say a U.S. fighter pilot or a drone accidentally shoots at one of those bases. Are we prepared for a whole military conflict with those two other regional powers? I don't think so. And this is why we got to get rid of the military-industrial complex, because that's a scenario that can happen.
Mm-hmm. And that's what we were saying a while back. We talked about this in depth, that if the U.S. was to invade Iran, people think that it'll just be like Iraq, and then the real issue is, we got to stay there for a while. Like, just look at those $15,000 drones. Like I said, someone that just sold their house can buy 10 of those.
Daniel, you know what? Just to add more to your argument.
Yeah.
Remember, like a few months ago, early in the summer, I think May or June, there was an
You bought a
article.
bunch of missiles?
No.
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 Never mind.
No.
Oh, that was me.
There was a $200 million U.S. drone that flew illegally into Iranian airspace that was shot down by a cheap rocket. So
Yeah,
a
and that's
$200
the
million
thing.
drone versus a cheap rocket.
And remember, the other thing is both China and Iran, in terms of defense, are like, okay, yeah, we're not going to spend $250 billion on an airplane because that's ridiculous. Or I didn't say $250 billion, I should say 1.25 trillion, so $250 billion plus $1 trillion, because we're going to invest in infrastructure and schools and make our people smarter so that they're more productive. Crazy things that Americans wouldn't want to do. But again, it's like America will be touched. It will not be, people remember 9/11 much more faintly if we go to war with Iran, because Iran will have the ability to touch America back. And even if we say not the homeland, what are they going to do when all the pipelines that go to the U.S. just blow up at once? That's not going to, we thought 1% was really terrible when it happened to Saudi Arabia. You block the Strait of Hormuz, there you go, it's like Iran has the real ability to take America down after the fact. Like, obviously, America will win a war with Iran eventually, but then you're going to have China and Russia. Like, here's a bunch of surplus materials. Take these. Oh, here's 100,000 mercenaries going your way. They're definitely not Chinese citizens. They're just mercenaries, because they all have vested interests, and Iran would cut a deal. Again, we're setting ourselves up to have our empire fall faster. And I said before, you have two ways. We choose the path or we don't. And America is hell-bent on 90-day returns. So they're not thinking about the long-term future.
Well, how punitive and how small is it of America to be basically just be like, how dare you, China? How dare you invest economically in another country that isn't us?
Well, Paul,
Without shooting them at the same time.
At the end of the article from the Forbes magazine, the author writes, China may have the buyer's remorse. Well, let's look what China is doing, especially in Central America and in Africa. Are they
Doesn't
supporting
look like buyer's
dictators?
remorse to me
No,
at all.
what they're doing is they're rebuilding and building infrastructure in those countries, and in countries that have been devastated by U.S. sanctions, or either that just the United States is turning a blind eye to the dictators that they help prop up, that support them in some way or form, either economically or through trade relations. And it's ridiculous that it's come down to this, to where the United States and especially the media itself is so gung-ho for an invasion of Iran, even though we are truly not prepared for the consequences and repercussions of a potential invasion. If we go through with this, if we just allow this to happen, so many people will be devastated by
You know
it.
what's more terrifying than 8 super expensive American planes with missiles that can go down your chimney coming at you at once? Iran retaliating by launching 1,000 $15,000 drones that each are strapped with explosives at once.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's a way to avoid this. This is why we got to get involved during this 2020 election cycle. We have to fight for a better future. Peace can be achieved.
Hashtag no war with Iran.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's just try the path of peace. Because, here's the thing. And while the Trump administration is, drumming the drums of war, you also have people in the DNC, corporate media, that are antagonizing him, telling him to go for it.
And there's one other thing.
The resistance.
I wanted
We've never tried war. Why don't you just try war?
Let me just
We've never done it before.
flick
Wait. No, we've been doing it.
Let me flick one extra thing here before we move on that I read that I thought was interesting.
Yeah.
If a recession is coming, which it is, one thing you can do to stave it off a little bit more is go to war and spend that money and help that economy for that little bit longer.
Oh, God.
So I think that if we did go to war with Iran, we probably would not have a recession until the end of the primary. Just putting that out there.
Which, okay, if you want to fold this into election predictions, going back to your earlier prediction, which is if the recession does not happen during the primary, likely Elizabeth Warren wins the primary.
Yes.
So if the recession were to happen then after the general or during let's say it happens after the general, let's say we get all the way through the general election.
Then you have a repeat of Obama. I would love to be wrong on this. I really would. But I'm not convinced. I'm sure that Elizabeth Warren would bail out the banks, then do like a little sprinkling. That'd be the difference. But then, the time that you have to really change the economy is what we saw under FDR. He comes in, depression happens, things need to happen only governments can do. And if you have the right person at a recession, the start of a recession, they can completely change everything about America. If you want a Green New Deal, you need Sanders in with a recession.
Absolutely. So, yeah, get involved in this
Feels
election
weird to
cycle.
root for that.
It's the time when things are broken is when they're most easy to be replaced.
Yeah.
And I guess we've been saying, and economists have been saying, that it's inevitable. It's a question of when.
Well, I find it funny that us, a couple of guys in a small studio, and even on
Slightly
radio.
larger now.
Yeah, slightly
larger studio.
No, but I'm talking about, just rewind back the clock to our smaller studio, and even when we were on radio, we were saying that, yeah, there's going to be a recession.
said it a year ago.
We don't want it to happen. You have Jimmy Dore, who's just a guy on a YouTube channel doing the same thing we're doing.
How are we able to predict what a multi-billion-dollar company can't?
And I've also been noticing this too from CNN and MSNBC on doing reports on how to protect your job during the recession. Work hard. You know what they're telling people? Work harder. Update your resume. Show your bosses that you're a hard worker too. Americans are the most productive people on the planet. We've been busting our butts off for years. You got Americans working 2 or 3 jobs. How much more hard do you want them to work? Yes, there's a recession on the way, but it's not the guy who's bagging groceries or filling up your car with gas or working on the streets or doing whatever a kind of simple job. No, the people who are responsible for destroying the economy are those in the top 1%.
And what's really funny is they're
Work
basically
harder.
telling entry-level Walmart workers ask for more hours when I'm sure most of them have been I wish I could for years now.
Oh,
I don't
yeah.
get enough hours.
Yeah, they also say
my
that, too.
resume. What resume?
No,
CNN, we are really in touch with the world.
Update your resume.
Whatever you do, don't join a union.
Yeah. Oh,
That'd
yeah.
be terrible. That's how you hurt yourself.
Have you guys ever seen those "Don't join a union"?
Oh yeah, there was
propaganda videos?
a big push for it 6 months ago or so. Like Delta had an ad that they ran, and their employees, one of the employees took a photo of it, and it was like, union dues are $400 a year. You should treat yourself and buy a video game system instead.
Yeah.
Like, fuck off, Delta.
Whatever.
Okay.
All right, now moving on to another story. Daniel, this is kind of historic. What's going on?
So, everyone ready? Drum roll. California has just banned private prisons.
Oh, what's going on?
Okay. So it's a big deal, but it's not as big a deal, but it is still a big deal. So I'm gonna
big-ish.
Go into why. Yeah, it's a big-ish deal. So California just passed a bill banning all for-profit prisons and immigrant detention facilities in the state, The Guardian reports. And some of these facilities could be gone as early as next year. Bill AB 32 passed Wednesday and heading to Governor Gavin Newsom's desk for signing would shut down private facilities that hold inmates with criminal convictions. Now, the caveat I want to add to this is there are only 4 for-profit prisons in California. It's not like other states where there's one in every town and every drive-through there's a private prison. California has a much smaller investment, and therefore the lobbying force is much weaker, though this is groundwork for other states to follow as California continues to lead the pack on many, many issues such as this. So, it would shutter privately run facilities for immigrants, which is another thing. People are saying, oh, you're just doing this against Trump, when I would say, good job. Who are considered civil detainees, people who have committed civil offenses but are treated like prisoners. There are currently 4 immigrant detention facilities. That's what when I said private prisons, I meant to say immigrant detention facilities. And it costs taxpayers $119.95 per person per day. You could put someone in a hotel, buy them dinner every day, and spend less money. But we don't do that because America very much cares about budgeting, and that's for the first 320 people there. And again, these are places that have clauses that if you don't fill these places up enough, we're going to shut them down, and you're going to get fined, because it's really smart for states to sign contracts that incentivize taking the freedom away from people in a place that calls itself the land of the free. Anyway, detainees often had to wait weeks and months in these facilities to see a doctor, and were put in solitary confinement for minor infractions. As of this year, about 52,000 migrants were held in June of this year in ICE custody, and around 71% of them are housed in facilities operated by private prisons. So this is private prisons taking 2 steps in. One, getting Americans for, smoking weed. And we've talked in the past how private prisons really like pot smokers because they're non-violent, so they don't have to worry about that. And it's all about profit. They will do the most work and cost the least amount of money. They don't want violent people. Those get stuck in public prisons, and then they go around and say, look at how terrible those public prisons are with all those really, really dangerous people. It's very much like we've talked about with charters, how they can headhunt in that way. So, California, good job. I'm really proud of you. You did something that you didn't have a huge investment in, so I'm not going to give you too much of a pat on the back. But you did something meaningful. You ended private prisons, and you've put a path forward for other states to go, see, California did it. Why don't you?
So there's only one thing I would like California to continue to push forward on and eventually acknowledge. Look, climate change is a real thing. It's a real fact that we have to deal with, and California has to deal with a lot of forest fires, and it impacts a lot of communities, towns, and cities. And who's on the front line? The firefighters. And who's doing most of the fighting? You got prison labor that's doing it. But when those said prisoners get out of jail, when they do their time, they cannot apply for a job to be a firefighter. Even though it's a respectable job, a trained profession that takes years to really get professional at, those said prisoners, men and women, cannot apply to become firefighters and can't be reintroduced into society properly. I mean, it's a learned skill. And they put their lives on the line to protect people's homes and towns. You think that, you should be excited. Okay, you did your time. Now you get to be a firefighter. You get to be a contributing member to society and help people. I mean, that's what we want. California help out those said prisoners apply for those jobs.
And just very quickly, because I know Paul wants to say something on this. Wasn't it Kamala who was very staunch in saying, no, these guys don't get to leave and get a job after that?
Yeah,
Just putting it
Kamala-
out there.
yeah, Kamala
Good job,
Harris.
Harris. You really got it going.
Yeah.
Good job.
Yeah.
Your polls are doing great. Remember how she told Tulsi, oh, you're too low in the polls. Now they're tied.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd love to ask Kamala, hey, what do you think about Tulsi now?
Hey, Kamala, how does it feel to be a top-tier candidate? This whole thing, it kind of strikes me. I mean, you put it, well, it's good-ish, right? There wasn't a lot of lobbying power preventing them from overturning these private prisons, and it's not lost on me that I don't know that Harris would have had much power anyway, but she's no longer the prosecutor of the state.
Oh, I know, but I just want to let people know more things about Kamala, the lovely Kamala Harris.
Yeah.
I don't know that the DOJ actually has that much say in that. I mean, it's a state legislature kind of
Yeah,
decision.
but she's still a powerful person with a voice, blah, 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 blah.
Right.
Yeah. So
Ultimately, this does need to spread to other states, and the argument for it, the groundwork is there. Like we understand things like civil asset forfeiture don't help people. We understand private prisons that have minimum occupancy requirements is detrimental to societies. Like it goes without saying. It's no-brainer type stuff. Like why are we doing this? Thank you for leading the way, California.
Yeah.
In yet another thing.
Yeah, let's continue to
I
push
think
forward.
I'm going to say one thing before we end. Please clap.
Yeah. No, wait.
All
Let's
right.
do 1, 2, 3. There we go.
Good job,
Hey.
California.
All right, California.
You
good
get a
job.
clap out of Heartland's Media.
Yeah,
Good
just
work.
one clap. But I'm also noticing a lot of people. Somebody mentioned in the chat as well that Bernie Sanders has vowed to end private prisons. That's from WBGS. I hope I said your name right. That is true. Bernie Sanders is against private prisons because we got to end the private prison industrial complex. But Paul, you have the final story, and this is a story that's very significant because it happened today. There's the global climate change walkout and strike led by Greta Thunberg, who's just a...
Or as Fox News would call it, those damn kids not going to school.
Yeah, so what's going on with this climate strike?
Yeah, so Greta Thunberg, the Swedish activist, started protesting on Fridays a while back now, in doing a school walkout. And we mentioned on the show before that's kind of an incredibly powerful message in and of itself. Like, this is a child that, if all things were going well, would be in school, but has decided to take that activism to the streets and has encouraged other people to join her. Now, today is the big day. Today is September 20th. It's the big first full organized day of the global climate strike, and Greta Thunberg has been vocal about asking the adults to join the strike. And today was the big day that was going to happen. And according to this story, thousands of scientists from 40 nations have joined the global strike. So there are a number of quotes in here from various scientists that are saying, if they're teachers, that they will either walk out of their class or they will have their students follow them for an outdoor classroom experience on civic engagement. If they're researchers, they will step away from their labs and from their computers and join this strike. They mentioned that in Greta Thunberg's testimony before Congress, she directed lawmakers' attention to the science of the climate crisis instead of offering an opening statement. She implored legislatures to read the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC's report detailing how the effects of climate crisis will be irreversible by 2030 unless world governments drastically reduce carbon emissions. I feel a pretty intense need to draw attention to this. If you weren't aware that this weekend was a big global climate strike weekend, and that going forward every Friday there will be continuing climate strikes, get involved. Check out 350.org. Its co-founder, Bill McKibben, has in recent weeks called on adults to stand alongside the millions of children who have walked out on their classrooms in the last year to demand the governments treat the climate crisis as an emergency that it is. Do that. Join these strikes on Fridays. Look at 350.org. Check out if there are local chapters. Bernie was streaming earlier today from, I believe, North Carolina and some of the climate strikes there where he spoke. This is a big deal, and what do we have? 11 years remaining before we can kind of turn this ship around.
But Paul, but Bernie Sanders is irrelevant. You heard it on CNN.
Yeah, the actress told me, or the model told me on Twitter that
Yeah.
That's who we gotta listen
okay,
to.
Okay, well, here's the thing. Climate change is a real threat. It's a real threat to the human species. And here you have children, kids, teenagers leading the way, asking adults to step up. And you know what? They're right. We have to. We have to step up because we have to make sure that they have a better future. And the very fact that you have children who are acknowledging something as a real threat to their future, and you have politicians in Washington, D.C., both Democrat and Republican, turning a blind eye, because guess what? Because of money in politics and Citizens United and McCutcheon's decision, you have Democratic and Republican officials that are bought and sold by the fossil fuel industry and numerous other lobby industries that are impacting American politics. We got to get money out of politics. We have to get involved in this election cycle, and we have to elect people that are going to address climate change for what it is. It's a reality. The debate is over. In fact, there never was a debate in the first place because we are impacting the planet. We are changing the atmosphere. We are changing the weather patterns of this planet. And right now, someone even mentioned in the live stream chat that there is a tropical storm that right now is impacting Houston, and that was Tony watches closely.
Six of them. I mean, I just saw a map. It was one of the stories I was considering covering, but there are 6 tropical storms or hurricanes, like within 200 miles of somewhere in the U.S. What? And it's like, okay, so, and here's the thing. When it really comes down to it, let me speak for myself on this. But maybe I'm speaking for the group. You guys can agree with me or not.
I probably will agree, but let's hear it.
I have a great live stream chat to read too, man.
If it takes the 20 to 40-year-olds that are alive right now to suffer tremendously for a generation so that these younger people have a chance to have a future that is bright, that they can bring even forward, that's completely worth it. It's worth, there's always been things that generations have had to do. You had in World War II, you had the greatest generation going to war on 2 fronts and sacrificing a lot, except, of course, we talked previously, except gasoline. They still had gasoline. We need to do that. We need to suffer together because previous generations that are in power, and specifically the members who are acting really in a sense, the people that it applies to are the people who I'm talking to, have put us in a situation where we're on the edge of catastrophe.
Yeah.
And what happens to the human species? I would say this is even more relevant and even bigger of a fight than World War II, because at least in World War II, no matter who won, someone would have won, and in this we can be in a situation where no one does.
Well, do you want to know what's going to happen? First example, if we don't address climate change, sea levels will rise, cities and towns will become uninhabitable. You'll have a massive amount of tornadoes, super hurricanes, polar vortexes, more droughts and famines, more forest fires. The Amazon was recently on fire. I mean, that's the Earth's lungs, for Christ's sake. You'll see a mass extinction of species. You'll see decay, the destruction of local economies and the international economy. You'll see the end of human civilization. I know it sounds crazy, but this is the overwhelming power of nature. And right now, across the board, humanity and its infrastructure, its political infrastructure, its economic infrastructure, is not prepared for the pushback of planet Earth and climate change. Because if we don't address it, it will be the end of the human species, and the planet will shake us off like a bad case of fleas and move on to the next species. Because humanity right now, we have the power and knowledge to change the future. So at the end of the day, the real power lies with all of you. But I got to read you guys a really awesome chat from DCK Punk. Guys, be serious. Alyssa Milano is trying to raise her kids. That's why we need Joe Biden. Think of Alyssa Milano's kids. Apparently she's a Biden supporter. Got to Biden it up.
I don't know. Greta Thunberg is thinking about the kids. That's what I think. Now, you mentioned a couple of things in there that I think are worth reiterating, calling attention to. So the Amazon being on fire, I think it often is inaccurately talked about as though, oh, the Amazon has caught fire. It's like, no, Bolsonaro and his government are setting the Amazon rainforest ablaze. It is being set on fire for economic reasons, right? For cattle herding and agribusiness. This is not a good thing. This is the kind of thing that can wreak havoc on our planet, our ability to have enough oxygen, the ability to keep the levels of carbon dioxide low. do not forget, there have been 5 extinction level events on this planet thus far. We are hurtling toward a 6th, either full extinction or near extinction like event. If you talk about this as though it could be World War III, but with no winners, yeah, that's what we're talking about, which is odd that that's dovetailing with also talking about, oh my God, let's not go to war with Iran because that would turn into World War III. So we've got 2 different World War IIIs looming. Have a nice day, everyone.
What's
Yeah.
that? What's that quote? World War. I don't know what World War III will be fought with, but I know World War IV will be fought with sticks and stones.
Actually, I don't know what weapons World War III will be fought with,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I know how World War IV. will
I
be
understood
fought
what he
with
meant.
sticks and stones. Yeah. Okay, no. All right.
There you go.
There we go.
Stickler for quotes.
So,
Just, real bright, feel-good stories over here at
and
Hardlines
also,
Media.
just to put in, because I have to bring up space mining at some point.
Yeah, I mean, it
If
wouldn't
we
be a
go-
show if
we
there
go
was no
through
space
this-
mining.
If we go through this, we will never leave Earth.
Yeah.
If we go to this, even if humanity survives, we will never be able to build up the resources needed to leave the planet again. So we will, in a very real sense, doom the human species forever, whereas humanity can and should enter its place among the stars.
Yep.
And again, humanity has the ability to go green tech, fix social issues, go into space, colonize, space mining, obviously, of course, obviously, so
Adapt us
obvious.
Astartes. What?
Fusion power plants. What I call, like, my dream is what I call the era of great projects. Humanity could go down that path, and that's a fun path that we would all love to wake up to every morning and hear about new discoveries on Mars or the asteroid belt, or we could keep fighting about oil in Iran and kill ourselves.
And
I like
is
that.
it-
What do you call it? Era of projects?
Era of great projects.
Of great projects. I just call it a Star Trek future. That's what I want. I want a Star Trek
Yeah,
future.
but that's copyright. This is my own edition.
Okay.
Personal.
I want to... All right, I'll have to think about that.
You want a golden
project, or
enlightened
great
age
projects.
of
The
humanity.
era of great projects.
All right, I like it.
You want a mankind's enlightened age of technology.
Yeah.
Dare I say it, a dark age of technology.
No, I want the nice bright one, not the dark one.
So,
The era of great projects. Everyone,
Yeah.
dream for the era of great projects. That's the best midterm next 1 to 500 year path for humanity.
Trademark Daniel Lopez.
Trademark.
Mark, yeah. So,
I'll open source it to you guys just for you.
so right now,
Creative Commons.
I've also noticed in the chat too that Tim Black right now can't live stream right now. I know he's been doing some recordings here and there, but we were a guest on a show a while back, I think last spring. And so, Tim, if you see this, all the best to you. Hope you can live stream again very shortly. The reason why we're able to do this here at Heartlands Media is because of viewers and subscribers. The reason why independent media, not only us, but Jimmy Dore and Tim Black and Nico House and everyone else, the reason why we're able to do this is because of you guys, viewers and subscribers. I mean, you guys are making this happen. You guys are giving a voice to independent media and making sure that we actually have power. And look, we started with just a Galaxy S7 cell phone, and now we have a 4-camera setup, a real professional studio that we maintain. No, we're on no one else's time. The only people's time who we're on, the only people we're going to answer to are you guys, our viewers and subscribers, because you guys believe in us. We've been on radio and television, and the thing is, you got to double check and triple check that you're subscribed to our channel, because I guess YouTube's not notifying people when independent media or even any other independent content creator is uploading content. It's sad, but here's the thing. Heartlands Media, we're on Monday through Friday, 6 p.m. Central Standard Time. You'll see either me, Paul, Daniel, Laney, Kira, Eric, and you'll see us here talking and giving you guys news that corporate media will not talk about, looking at articles and give our perspective towards it. And we want to do something that hasn't been seen here in the city of Chicago, and that's create a strong, progressive, independent media network covering stories that corporate media will not cover. To our subscribers, we can't thank you enough. And if you really want to help out Heartlands Media, check in the description box below. We have a Patreon page. To our Patreon supporters, you are our main heart and backbone to everything that we do, and we can't thank you enough. So if you want to be a Patreon supporter, it will really help us out a lot in regards to getting better gear and keeping this studio afloat too, because you guys are making this a people-powered movement, and we want to really cover the 2020 election cycle with style. There we go. Tongue twister right there. So let me read the list of the Hall of Heroes because you guys are just epic and awesome. So shout out to Myra Alejandra Sanchez, Carlos Ozario, Cassie Lloyd, Ishmael Rufus Chase, Gregory Church, Kira McCown, Sandra Grayson, NC Schaefer. There we go. Anthony Nelson, Teresa Collins, Brina Cabrera, Desmond Turek, Jack Morse, Sandra Mayer, Lewis Giffey, Ariana Henson, Michael Ealing, Emmy, Unknown Space Pioneer, Denise Gibson, Freethinker 59, Jeff Reneque, Tina Krautz, Carl Espud, Yuletides, Jack Papria, Brian Thomas, Savut Tet, Wella Demooney, Dimitri N, Deanne, Kai Arnold, Jeff Green, Susan Singer, Todd Adams, Eric Unger, Ramon Lazo, Alan Marone, Carrie Barber, Louis Grever Conroy, Alexis Haas, Aaron Stein, Wolf, Mike Honcho, Ashwin Ruvkumar, Akbesh Akita, Maya Jones, and then Fred Edward. To our Patreon supporters, you're making this happen. And if to any of our YouTube subscribers, if you want to be a Patreon supporter, please continue to help us out. Consider being a Patreon supporter. It will help us. But also, I want to give a major shout out to our rogue trader, Wesley Wiles. If you're in the chat, thank you, my friend. We are interviewing so many interesting congressional and Senate candidates. You've been introducing them to us. And we want to make sure that you guys are aware that, not only is there a presidential election cycle happening, but there's also other offices that are open that can bring in much needed change. So with that being said, I want to thank Paul DuPont for manning the board. That's now right there at his fingertips.
So
It's
take a little
amazing
getting
what-
used to.
Yeah.
It's amazing what new tech will do.
Yeah, we're
See,
so,
this is a very small version of the era of great projects.
yeah, right there. With that, Patreon supporters, you helped
Throw a
that.
GIF up, man. Throw a GIF up.
Wait,
what
hold
you
on,
can
wait.
do.
Hey, look.
Let's Biden it up.
I've got gifts on the board.
And I want to give a huge
See,
shout out to
I
Daniel.
said to everyone the longest time, people were asking, when are you going to get graphics? And I said, when we have the budget. We have the budget.
Yeah, all it needed was buttons.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Hey,
you got,
that took budget.
It did.
yeah. So again, huge thanks to Paul DuPont, Daniel Upker. Shout out to Lainey Peterson, who's manning the chat. Thank you again to our viewers and subscribers. Thank you again to our Patreon supporters. You guys are keeping the studio afloat. Please consider supporting independent media. With that being said, I'm Kit Cabello with Hard Lens Media. Peace, and let us all do what we can to build a better future.